We live in a world ruled by tyranny, where knowledge is suppressed and ignorance is glorified. A world where propaganda and misinformation travel the airways at the speed of lies. But in the midst of the violence and chaos, a great awakening is taking place. And as the media empires continue to collapse, a new network is forming. A network of truth, a network of courage, a network of awareness. Peace and greetings. You are now tuned into the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, where we examine current events, politics, health, finance, and topics of cultural relevance in America and throughout the world, while bringing you insightful interviews with guests that will both educate and inspire you. And now, your host of the Network of Awareness podcast radio station, ORRA the Informationalist.
Please just tell me what's happening to me in plain English without the mumbo jumbo.
You are now tuned in to the Network of Awareness.
My aura is a network full of awareness and gifts like ORRA, the informationalist.
Peace and greetings, brothers and sisters from around the world. Welcome to a live broadcast of the Network of Awareness here on Spreaker.com. If you haven't subscribed or follow on Spreaker, what you waiting for? I'm your host, owner and founder of the Network of Awareness, or the Informationalist. And today we got a great show for you of Season 5, Episode 58. Police Reform. The Quiet Storm. And the reason why I titled it that is because, as you well know, the Democratic Party, the Biden administration, along with just the government as a whole, because it's two sides of the same coin, but they are really pushing forth this police reform. So I'm going to bring two brothers that are veterans on the force. I've had them both come onto the show separately, so some of you may know of these people. One of them is Joseph Smith, who's an NYPD police officer. Another brother is a brother by the name of Ritchie. And Baez, he is a police officer that was on the Crime and Punishment documentary that's currently on Hulu. If you haven't checked it out, check it out. Also known as Brother Lamab within the BOCC. So what I decided to do was to bring these two brothers on the show because between the both of them, they have over 40 years plus of experience on the New York City Police Department force. And we're going to discuss this police reform. We're going to tie it into how this incident with Tyre Nichols, which was a big-time homicide, and how it's being tied into bringing forth this propaganda and agenda for police reform, which, as we speak, they are pushing forth and introducing and lobbying for these bills to be passed for police reform. And if that happens, what you have to understand is, even though there's some rotten apples within the police departments across the country, if you get rid of the police force or deplete it, it's only going to bring about anarchy. It's only going to bring about civil unrest that is going to cause a tremendous amount of chaos. So, what I'm going to do right now, before I bring these brothers on the show, I'm going to play two songs here by some brothers that I truly appreciate, my spiritual MCs that send some spins into the network of awareness. And like I always mention, if you want to have your music played on the show, all you got to do is pay $75 per spin. You get 5 spins for the 5 days in a row that we broadcast, and then your music stays in rotation forever on the network of awareness. So if that's something you're interested in, please do that. And the 2 songs that are going to be played today, and I think they're fire, as they always are. So we're going to play a song by Brother Yazan, and it's called Coconut Water 2. And then we're also going to play a song by Brother Take One, and it's featuring Brother Kadar from the BOCC, who does the introduction. And it also has another artist by the brother by the name of NYPD. And that song is called Tears of Israel. So let's take a listen to these 2 songs real quick. And then I'm going to bring in the 2 police officers to discuss this police reform, the quiet storm. Let's get it popping, shall we?
Thirst is real.
You are now tuned in to the network of awareness.
Thirst is real. Better make sure to get hydrated right. Whoa! Y'all zoom. I'm a baller. Shot call. No wonder I go hard. Me to her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. I'm a baller. No wonder I go hard. Me to her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. Every time I take a sip, I wanna move my hip, come on, move my shoulders and jig, then take another swig. I needed a refill. Come on. So I headed to the kitchen. Then I gave the juice a boost. With some limes and lemons. Took a walk to the mall. Coconut water in my hand. Everyone who seen me, they all yelled, "You're the man." Then a woman pulled up. She took my coconut water with a quickness. Took a sip, then she moaned, "It's delicious." Then she gave me the digits. I'm a baller. Shot call. No wonder I go hard. Me to be her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. I'm a baller. Shot call. No wonder I go hard. Me to be her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. I love coconut water. Do you love coconut water? Yes, I'm trying to get a sponsor. The way I roll, it would be an honor. I called little shorty who would put me over. She answered and said, "What's up?" What it do? I replied and said, "Nothing much. Coconut water in my cup." Then she said, "Come over. You can relax. Take a breather." I said, "I don't know. I just put another cup in the freezer." But I did, then I ran into her father. He looked at me like, "How you know my daughter?" Then he started to cry and said, "Thank God you love coconut water." I'm a baller. Shot call. No wonder I go hard. Me to be her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. I'm a baller. Shot call. No wonder I go hard. Me to be her mom and a father. All I do is drink coconut water. Shake that, work that, better twerk that. Shake that, work that, better twerk that. Shake that, work that, better twerk that. I ain't talking about your ass, I'm talking about the water. I ain't talking about your ass, I'm talking about the water. I ain't talking about your ass, I'm talking about the water. I ain't talking about your ass, I'm talking about the water. Serve chill, don't spill, you gotta think smarter.
You are now tuned in to the network of awareness.
Give not over thy mind to heaviness, and afflict not thyself in thine own counsel. The gladness of the heart is the life of man, and the joyfulness of a man prolongeth his days. Love thine own soul, and comfort thy heart. Remove sorrow far from thee, for sorrow hath killed many, and there is no profit therein. Envy and wrath shorten the life, and carefulness bringeth age before the time.
Tears dripping, fears gripping, yeah, shifting. You can hear the snipping from Persian. Messiah's near, gotta complete the mission. Repentance before the Almighty unleashes vengeance on this wicked dimension. Before I leave, gotta finish the mission for my king. Not gonna switch up positions, cause Lord, I need you with me. I'm praying on my knees. Man, something ain't right with the throne. Tears dripping, Babylon's been on too long. Tears dripping, fathers walking out on their own. Tears dripping, Israel wanna come home. Depression rampant, brothers searching for answers, but the answer's not in them liquor cabinets or sticks of cancer. Philippians 4:13, read the chapter. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
When my tears fall, you never shut me out. You gotta help me out. You never let me down. When my tears fall, you never shut me out. You gotta help me out. You never let me down.
We came for a history. Every day we fighting for the victory. Oh, Father, lead us to the victory. Only you can free us from the enemy.
Hey, Father, give us the strength.
All the many, many tears.
And you, we put all our faith.
All the many, many tears.
Cause only you can erase.
All the many, many tears. All the many, many tears of
My
Israel.
tears be dripping and sinking in oceans. I'm feeling the heat cause I'm homesick. I gotta stay focused. My hope isn't floating above all the water that provoke my emotions. I'm rolling and soaking in waters of wholeness to keep me from sinking to the bottom of hopeless. I find it atrocious, but keep my devotion, cause I'm not the only brother trying to stay up and hold it. I cry when they fold and I try for devoted soldiers of Judah all across narrow roads. And I know this might be my very last chance, so I'll say my piece for a very last dance. Yeah, my very last chance just to make a difference for people who don't laugh just because you different. Saints hold fast cause it's been many years, and this is for family and all of your tears.
We came for a history. Every day we fighting for the victory. Oh, Father, lead us to the victory. Only you can free us from the enemy.
Hey, Father, give us the strength.
All the many, many tears.
And you, we put all our faith.
All the many, many tears.
Cause only you can erase.
All the many, many tears. All the many, many tears of Israel.
You are now tuned in to the Network of Awareness.
All right. So that was Coconut Waters 2 by Brother Yazan. And second song was Tears of Israel by Take One featuring Brother Kadar and NYBY. And thank you, brothers, for sending in those spins. Truly love and appreciate y'all. Keep it coming. Keep it going. All praises to the Most High and Christ the Messiah for you brothers having the gifts and abilities that were given by the Most High to do what you do. Now, let's start off with this episode. So I'm going to welcome onto the show. We're going to bring Joe and Ritchie onto the show, and just give me a moment and let's unmute them here and get it popping. So welcome to the show, brothers. Thank you for coming on to the Network of Awareness for this episode 58. And I'm really looking forward to having this discussion with you on police reform, the quiet storm. So welcome. Either one of you can talk and introduce yourselves. So if you want to go first, Ritchie, you can start it off, and then we'll let Joe talk.
Okay, I'll just start off by giving all praises to the Most High and Christ for allowing us to do this special episode together here. My name is Ritchie Baez. I'm a 19-year veteran at NYPD. I also part of the documentary called Crime and Punishment that won tons of awards, Emmys, Sundance, you name it, we did it. And we're going to talk about the current state of policing in the United States.
Welcome, bro. Hey, Joe, if you want to introduce yourself and let the listeners know who you are real quick, even though you're not a stranger to the show.
Well, thank you for having me again. Officer Smith, over 20 years policing in NYPD, and basically just like to bring awareness and information to whoever I can. And that's basically it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, as always, I do appreciate you brothers coming on. And for those that don't know, we had Joe on the show for the first episode of Erroneous Law Enforcement, which was the part 1. We also had Ritchie on the show. We had Ritchie on the show for 2 shows. For the one that we did on Tyre Nichols, where we did a play-by-play. And let me just look up those shows so I make sure I don't mess this up. So we had Ritchie on for Erroneous Law Enforcement Part 2, which was we did the Tyre Nichols breakdown. And then the first episode that he was on in season 5 was, let's see here, just so I make sure that I get this right, because Ritchie was actually one of the first guests on. Yeah, he was on episode 2 of season 5, which was called The Purpose for Police, which were all great shows. They got a lot of great responses. People are still downloading the show. So thank you for that. So let's get into this. I want to start off by reading a couple of articles here, and we'll actually go through the articles as we talk, but let's talk about the first one, because we'll start off with this whole thing with Tyre Nichols, which is big topic of discussion these days. It's something that's been across the commercial media channels a lot. And it's nothing that is new when it comes to the United Shenanigans of America, as far as like police brutality, and especially when it comes to so-called black and brown men. They get, that seem to be targets. And the brothers that I have on here, before they became police officers, they experienced being a target of that type of abuse to some degree as well. So they're very transparent in how they view policing, because you have to understand something, brothers and sisters. It's like I've encountered good police, but I've encountered more bad than good. But there are good police officers that handle their responsibility and the oath that they taken very ethically. But then there's those that don't, and that's with any industry. Any industry, you're gonna have people that are just not good, and then people that are. Unfortunately, we live in a society right now that really endorses, promotes, and supports narcissistic behavior. Narcissism is on the rise, which is just another form or name for wickedness. But especially here in the capitalistic country of America, narcissism is rewarded. Narcissism is favored by the powers that shouldn't be. So let's read this article real quick, and then we're gonna have this discussion here about this. So it says all 5 Memphis police officers were charged in the fatal beating of Tyre Nichols, failed to capture the entire encounter of the body-worn cameras, which we're going to discuss that as well. All 5 fully removed their body-worn cameras during the still active scene, according to the newly released police documents obtained by Insider. Following Nichols' death, the police department released portions of responding officers' body-worn camera footage, as well as the CCTV the CCTV video of the encounter. And real quick, because I'm hearing something in the background, and I'm wondering which one is coming from. Hold on. Okay, that was Ritchie. Ritchie, you got some type of, I don't know what happened, but you got some type of distortion coming in. So maybe you could fix that. Yeah, I think it's what's on your shirt. Clip your microphone onto your shirt so that way it doesn't move, because that's what's happening. It's going across your jacket there.
How about now?
Yeah, as long as you stay still like that, you good, bro.
Okay. All right. I'll try. All
right. Because it's hard for me to take that stuff out on the back end. But okay. So continuing on with the article, the most thorough accounting of the deadly confrontation, however, came from controversial Sky Cop cameras that are installed throughout Memphis in crime hotspots and have cost the city more than $10 million. Well, hey, good investment, I would say, because if it wasn't for those Sky cams, we would have a whole different narrative to this story. Police documents obtained by Insider and Tuesday paint a picture of repeated missteps by responding officers, one of whom admitted to taking and then sharing a photo of Nichols blooded, bruised, and handcuffed on his personal cell phone in the aftermath of the confrontation. I'm going to stop right there because we're also going to discuss that, how this was a personal hit for reasons of jealousy and envy. Okay. And this is alleged rumor because it's alleged that Tyre Nichols was now in a relationship or messing around or something with Healy's ex-girlfriend. And that was one of the people that got the picture sent to them. So we're going to discuss that too. But before we do that, where would you brothers like to start off in regards to this story? Because there's so much to discuss about this that we're going to be presenting here on today's show.
I would like to start with the culture of policing. Let's start right there.
Okay.
Tyre Nichols, what makes this case more galvanizing and more polarizing is the officers that did the beating were all black, and they did on a black man. And we're used to seeing like the Rodney Kings. What happened? Usually white officers beating on a black officer. The George Floyd situation. You see a white officer sitting on a black man that cuffed, sitting on his neck. Now you see 5 black officers brutally assaulting and murdering on young black men. So the reason I want to go tackle the culture is because people think just by changing the color of the police department is going to bring results. It's not the color, it's the culture. The culture is very insulated. Once you come into the culture, you adopt it. They force you to adopt that doctrine and follow that way. And we can even go to the spiritual aspects. Back to the time of the Maccabees, when the Greeks was trying to force our forefathers to become Greeks, they already have men that was established to follow those things. So it was no longer the Greeks that was killing us. It was our own forefathers, our own brothers and sisters that was killing our own people. That's what happened when you have an insulated culture and the people adopt to it. And not only adapt to it, they embrace it wholeheartedly as their own. So they follow that plan. It's like a form of brainwashing. It is a form of brainwashing. So that's one of the things that happened with Tyre Nichols. Also, like you said, the personalization with the alleged rumor, because the way Haley was kicking Tyre in his head, and the way he was hitting him, it was pure rage. It was just personal. I've seen people get their behind beaten, but not like that. Not like that. Now your Rodney King looked that personal, and he got beaten bad.
How's my audio, by the way? Still good?
Hey, Joe, your audio sounds great.
All righty. I'd like to piggyback on what Rich said. This seemed totally different from when we see Rodney King and all the other black people being assaulted by white cops. It has a different flavor to it. You didn't see fear in these officers. You saw purpose. They went right to what they were doing. They abandoned all police techniques, procedures, and it just felt personal from just looking at it. The first technique the first thing I noticed was the technique. It was horrible. Car stop is about safety, is about controlling the person so they can't hurt you. And so you could be safe and you could do your job as a cop. Well, I did not see that. I just saw them recklessly. Nobody wanted to cuff them. Usually if there's 4 cops, each of us grab an arm and a leg, bring them down to the ground, cuff them, and use the least amount of force we can so we can cuff them, and then we don't have to explain all these bruises on somebody. They did not have that technique. There was so many of them, and nobody grabbed. There's one arm was grabbed. They got thrown to the ground. They were too busy punching them and kicking them. Some random cop was all the way to the right doing I don't know what, and then walks over, kicks them in the head, walks away. It's just the flavor. It just, when you look at it, it was totally different from what I see when most white cops who have some sort of predetermined fear or interest, where they'll see a white person with a knife and they'll treat that person different. If the person was black with a knife, they'll use more force. So it just had a different flavor. From the get-go, it just looked totally personal. Again, it's an opinion. I don't know, but just from my experience, this man will be on the floor and cuffed quickly so that he can't hurt me and he can't hurt himself and get the job done. If this is a car, you summons him, you let him go. This is more than that. And we need some more transparency, because there's too many things that are not being told right now. And when you don't tell the public what's really happening, you're going to have civil unrest. And there's going to be more and more problems. Also, in regards to transparency, everyone involved should have been immediately put on the list. All these people were involved, not just 5 black officers. There was a white officer and some other people, and he pulled out his taser. So he had a very important role in it, whether it was lethal, non-lethal force. You have to be transparent. Everyone gets put on the list. These are the people that were there, and one by one, we're going to investigate. And this is what we did to each one of them. This is why. You tell the people what's going on, they understand. But when you try to hide, it makes us very suspicious, and it gives more fuel to the side that wants to get rid of the police department. Another topic, obviously, but yeah, it was more about technique and purpose, and I just did not like the way everything went down.
Right, and it was quite obvious. I mean, just with the punching and the kicking of the head and holding him up. And one thing that I discussed with Ritchie on the last episode we did, and there's something that stood out to me immediately from watching it the first time and hearing about this that didn't make sense to me, was that you had 5 police officers, and these are not, none of these guys were small, to say the least. These are some pretty big dudes, they had some weight on them. And it just was so interesting how they couldn't get handcuffs on him at any point in time. And there was even a point in time where they had his hands behind his back, where 2 officers were literally holding him with his arms behind his back. So you would think that would be the perfect time to put those handcuffs. And any other time, that's exactly what would have happened. But instead of putting handcuffs, they held him back like that so that another officer can punch him in the face. So I'm going to continue reading with the article, and then we'll have you brothers chime in again. So it says the Tennessee Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, a state board agency, received the police document late last month as part of a 5 decertification request made by the Memphis Police Department for the 5 officers involved. Emmett Martin III, Desmond Miles Jr., Justin Smith, Demetrius Haley, and Tadarius Bean were all fired and have since been charged with second-degree murders in the Nichols death, which in my opinion, I think it should be first degree if this is brought out to be a personal matter. On the evening of January 7th, Memphis police officers stopped Nichols on suspicion of reckless driving. And that's another thing too, is that stop was in so many ways not what we're used to. I mean, you're supposed to ask for a driver's license and registration. They immediately pointed guns on him like he was a drug kingpin or something, or a guy that had like 100 guns on his person. It also says that an initial confrontation between Nichols and several officers ensued as they pulled him out of the vehicle and pushed him to the ground. A second confrontation occurred after Nichols got up and ran away as an officer tried to tase him. Body camera footage showed several officers beating Nichols while he was on the ground. So we've already covered that before. Something that you mentioned about the civil unrest, which is now kind of protocol, especially with the propaganda behind that organization that's funded by George Soros, which is Antifa, which it seems to be protocol now with Antifa. Wherever there's an incident like this, they come out and they just cause anarchy. And what's interesting about what people don't realize is that every single person, and I mean every single person across the country that is part of this organization known as Antifa, they always get arrested, but they never get charged. Charges are always dropped, no matter what they are arrested for. And you have to ask yourself, brothers and sisters, why is it every district attorney is dropping the charges against Antifa when they are arrested? That's the big illusion, because when they show you them getting arrested, you think that they're going to go to jail, but they never do. But with that being said, I'm going to read another article, okay? And I'm only going to read a couple of sentences here. This is an article from WSJ Opinion. It says, after Tyre Nichols, what should police reform look like? Students discuss officer brutality and misconduct in the wake of the killing. And it says, editor's note, in this future view, students discuss police reform. Next week, we'll ask, how should the military have reacted? Oh, no, that's irrelevant. It says, it is interesting to note that one of the Memphis police officers involved in the killing of Tyre Nichols is a former prison guard. That's Healy, by the way. And he has an incident where he beat the hell out of somebody, which they'll discuss right here. So this officer is now being accused of previously beating an inmate in 2016, leaving us wondering, why was this guard hired to begin with? The answer is low hiring standards. Current conversations about police reform have to do with defunding or reallocating police resources. But it's paradoxical that reform lies in weakening the financial support that is needed to employ the appropriate human capital. We often find merit in the argument that paying teachers higher salary produces more qualified candidates. Why is this the same argument not true for the police whose responsibility is to protect and serve? Both teachers and police officers serve American citizens. Police reform through higher budget allocation is necessary. Lowering standards simply to fill open positions, it's not. So brothers, I want to take this conversation into this police reform agenda, because even though we do have police brutality and it is a concern, why do you think that they're pushing this police reform so much? And also, I want to get your thoughts on what would New York, let's just talk about New York City, where you brothers work at. What would New York City look like if this bill for police reform was passed and put restrictions on what the police can do, and also having less police officers in the street? And any one of you can talk, and you don't have to take turns.
Disaster. In my opinion, it'd be complete disaster. What's holding back the bad guys is basically that the police. And when you tell somebody that they could just randomly do whatever they want and not face consequences, you're inviting anarchy and just chaos. They will find out if it ever happens. Hopefully it never will. They will find out very quickly. As soon as you loosen up the reins, it'll go bad very quickly. You think it's bad now, it'll be a lot worse. I'm sorry. Were we talking about the police reform? And because I know you were talking about teachers, right? And you were saying that we need to pay them more to get better quality teachers. And
well, that's what the article was saying. They was just using it as a point of reference in the topic of discussion when referring to education and how we view the salaries of teachers opposed to how we view the salaries of police officers. So they were making a comparison in the article.
Right. Well, I believe when in regards to that, it's the goal. It's where we want to get to. So teaching actually leads to education, educated children or whoever. And that's how they show that they're doing their job correctly. With cops, our end result is the big 2 or 3. It's arrests, summonses. It's some sort of quota system. So how teachers get paid more and you see better education with the cops, it's a little tricky. And police reform is not easy. It's like brain surgery. It's so difficult just to, you have to break it down in so many different ways. But at the end result, how police show that they're doing their job is arresting people. We don't get credit for helping people doing things. So the more arrests we have, then we show that we are doing our jobs. So you got to be very careful, because if you tell the higher ups, starting from the mayor, that we need better cops and we need more results. Results always end 99% of the time with policing with arrests. And when crime goes down, they still want that same number. So they start reaching a little further and further to arrest more and more people so they can have the numbers. They always say crime been up in the last month, has been down 5%, 2%, whatever it is. So be very careful when you say, anyone says about the end result of good policing. They have to change it. And then you could sit there and focus more on better cops. But it's very tricky. And like you said, paradoxical.
Yeah, well said, Joe. Well said. Go ahead, Ritchie.
I like to piggyback on Joe a little bit of what defines a good police officer. I mean, what the article says, the lower the pay for a very unthankful job, the best qualified candidates will not go for that job. They'll go for a department that pays more. So that's going to lower the standards, because, you need to have X amount of officers in the city. Otherwise, crime will go up significantly. So the definition of a good police officer, you can have an officer that doesn't know how to swim, jump into a river to save a 6-year-old child from drowning. You can have an officer wrestle a violent criminal with a gun and take away the gun away from him. Both of them were amazing work. But the only one that will count when you go for your promotion to go to a specialized unit, to become a detective, so forth, or go to narco, is the gun arrest. Because that's what shows up. Because when they look at it, what Pete says is the arrest and summonses. Those are the main things. And before, how many people you stopped, the stop and frisk. They don't look about your other attributes. And that one needs to change. You have to take the whole picture, how you interact with the public. The type of arrest that you make, how many people you save, how many people you influence and guide to become a better person, to join the police officers. Those are qualities that you should look at. And with the police reform, like the George Floyd bill, is really symbolic. It doesn't have any teeth to it, because what usually happens is that you have the cops take the brunt of all the work. You have to look at the supervision, because like in the Bible says, the way the judge is, so are their officers. So if the cops is running like a cowboys like that, how is the supervisor? How is he and she behaving? How is the commissioner or the chief in that department? So what happens is you have to be able to hold all those people accountable, not just the individual that's doing it. And that's when you're going to receive real good change. And the George Floyd bill doesn't have it. And just to go on a little sidebar, one of the guys that I was with in the documentary, investigator Manuel Gomez, he proposed a bill. And these bills is currently in 6 states trying to be passed. And we're trying to get on the federal level. And this bill allows basically judges, chiefs, officials, and all across the board for corrections, PD, and fire department to be criminally prosecuted, which the George Floyd bill does not allow. That's how you have real change. The people on top can be criminally prosecuted and held accountable. That's when things change. Because the way the culture is, it's insulation and many different layers. It's like an onion. The main culprit is in the core, but to get to the core, you have to peel back that onion to get to the core.
Accountability is the key, what he just said. And the funny part that I see it is the main culprit starts at the top, the mayor, the police commissioner. Nothing happens unless he or she wants it to happen. If they want crime to go down, they'll just simply tell the police commissioner, I want crime to go down. I want more arrests for this. I want more arrests for that. That's going to trickle all the way down to the cops. And there is no question about whether or not it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen one way or another, whether they fudge the numbers, whether they go and overreach. You said they arrested a lot of Antifa, and a lot of people never make it to the trial. It's because of the way they're arrested and the facts. When a ADA or the DA looks at it, it doesn't make sense. They can't go forward because you have some boss just pointing at that person, arrest them. The cop has to arrest them, has no clue why, but the boss said it, so you have to do it. You do it, and then it goes through the system. And at the end, there's nothing there. It's just basically, my boss told me to arrest them. It's a lawful order. I have to do it or I get suspended. So it starts at the top. It starts way up at the mayor and it goes all the way down. The mayor gives you a lot of lip service through the news and all the media coverage. And then behind the closed doors, he'll say exactly what I want. And then everyone under that is going to follow it. And that's where the reform comes. That's where the accountability comes. These politicians face no accountability. They can say and do whatever they want. And it always gets some person is going to take the hit and retire, and nothing's going to happen because the cop is going to get arrested. One of the chiefs will retire, and it'll be replaced by the same chief that learned the same technique, who has to learn from the same politician, and it repeats itself. So it's very difficult to get this police reform done when it's actually all the way at the top. So tell the cops to do as many things as you want. It's not going to change because every time that one cop steps out and says something, they destroy that cop, and it teaches all the other cops to stay quiet. So, every time I hear police reform, I cringe. But I pray that, the system, someone eventually will get it right.
I remember that both of you had told me instances of, your fellow peers within the force, where it's like you have one officer, and I don't remember if it was Ritchie or Joe that you told me that there's one officer that actually arrested a serial rapist. and finally caught him. And there was other officers around that same time. They just had more arrests and more summonses that were issued. And they got rewarded for just having a lot more arrests than the guy who had that one major arrest of taking a rapist off the streets, which I found like it's just like how when these pedophiles get arrested and sentenced, they get these very light sentences. But then you have a guy who had some crack on him and he's getting 25 to life, you know, for having a couple of vials of crack or a small portion of it. It just doesn't make sense. It's so upside down and unbalanced. I'm pretty sure you both are well aware that in California, they released a lot of criminals out into the public, and a lot of them were rapists. A lot of them were pedophiles. And now they're putting these guys out in the street that should be serving long-term sentences and now setting them free. And I don't know if they're doing that in New York, which I haven't heard anything like that. But I do know that whenever it starts somewhere, it spreads like wildfire. It starts to trickle down to the other places. So California seems to be the guinea pig for this type of propaganda when it comes to the way they are enforcing or their lack of enforcement on these laws with these criminals and releasing them into the street. And I just wanted to kind of get your insights on that, on what it would look like if they start releasing these criminals with pretty severe charges and sentences and actually start putting them out in the streets of New York City.
I mean, we see it now. With the bail reform, it's like in a society that's corrupt. They will never get it right. They either go too far to the left or too far to the right. There's no balance. With the bail reform, yes, we should have had a reform because the way it was done was totally corrupt. But instead of taking advice of law enforcement officials or people that have experience in law enforcement, they just created a bill, which to me was done on purpose, in my opinion, was done on purpose, that they went all the way to the left and they basically handcuff the judges. Like one of the things that a judge can't do, they can't look at the criminal before them, their previous arrests. What's their previous history? I could get arrested 3 times for shooting somebody, but every time I go before the judge, it's like the first time I got charged. So that's why I get released, ROR, released on my own recognizance, and continue running a roughshod in the city. Even what's going on with the city, like all these organized gangs that go into these jewelry stores and robbing everything. And also people going to these different Rite Aids and pharmacies, stealing all the drugs or the narcotics that's there and wiping it clean. They get caught and re-released. So they can continue doing the same thing over and over. That's why you see a lot of these stores close down. And they close it down in predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods, Black and Latino neighborhoods. And all those people that work in the stores, they don't have a job no more. So it's increasing the unemployment rate. So it's basically hurting us more than anybody else. And I recently read an article that there's only 2,000 people in the city of New York that's doing all those smash and grabs in the stores. 2,000 people. Some of them, majority of them are organized criminals, and some of them are just people with emotionally disturbed things that they need their proper care. So the people that have mental health issues, they need to be put not in jail, but in a place to treat their mental health issues. The organized criminals, they need to serve stiff sentences so you can show the examples about you can't do what you're doing. So this is what they're doing. And my theory is they want this public to be fed up with everything that's going on, so they can call back the old draconian ways. You want this stiffer punishment. You want this 1 to 100 rule. That's basically what's the crime bill that was done by the Clintons and the drug war by the Nixon. You have 1 gram of crack, you get your minimum sentences is 15 years. As opposed for someone that has cocaine, you have to have 100 grams. It's a big difference, right? 100 grams of coke with 1 gram of crack for a substance that's basically the same. It's basically the same. Only one is the rock form and the other one is powder. But the demographics of the people that use it is different or sell it. Crack was basically Black and brown people in the city. Coke is pretty much primarily a so-called white man's drug. So the policing is going to be different. The tactics is going to be different. Like you said earlier, a man that has a knife, a white man that has a knife, and white officer approached them, they'll try to talk it out, try to calm them down before get shot.
Right.
There's a video in California. You see a guy that has no legs, is amputated on a wheelchair with a knife, and he gets gunned down, and he's trying to run away from them as he's swinging the knife. is a lot of things that's being taught and being insinuated. Even from my academy days, my gym instructor will say, hey, you got to work out, got to be strong, because you see those kids that's doing those pull-ups and those light poles and the East New York, they doing that because they're getting ready to fight you. I'm like, no, they just working out, because me going to Spanish Harlem, I used to do the same thing. And the last thing I wanted to do was train for a fight. And even the guys that were in the streets when they was doing that, they wasn't thinking about fighting the cop. They was just working out.
They thinking about looking good for the women.
Yeah. So
sometimes you can't afford a gym, so you just do it in the street.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Jack and Lane was pretty expensive back then.
Jack and Lane.
Yeah, Golds and Jack and Lane was the popular ones. Great points. Now I'm going to read another article that that is from the same main article from WSJ, and I think it's very interesting. And let me read this real quick. Reform locally. This is by Aaron Clay from Brigham Young University. His story. It's easy to make generalizations about law enforcement, but in practice, policing requires quick judgment under immense pressure. No one can be fully trained for split-second decisions, but policing is generally good. Police departments, however, are under the control of local politicians who often don't trust or who often don't truly understand the nature of the work. Facts. Rules those politicians make with good intentions, which is a lie, it's never good intentions, often lead to bad results. It's best to leave policing to the experienced leaders and officers within departments. When politicians make decisions, they should lean on as much advice and testimony from experienced officers as possible. I think they should rely on the community with the officers in conjunction, but that's just my opinion. This model for police reform is slow, but will preserve law and order in American cities from the ground up and protect communities from shifting political winds. So what do y'all think about that?
Well, what I think about it is very accurate. I'll give you an example. There's a civil rights activist, and I think he was in Colorado or Arizona. And the civil rights activist, he was very anti-cop. So what happened, the police department brought him to a simulation room and gave him scenarios. And every scenario that he did, where he thought the perpetrator was armed, he shot. And at the end results, when they said, no, he wasn't armed, he wasn't this, he wasn't that. So now that civil rights activist, he has a different perspective now. And also his following dwindled because now he has a better perspective now. When it comes to law enforcement, the civilians and law enforcement should work together. The issue is there's a disconnect between the society. I'll give you a society like in Israel. Everyone from 18, both men and women, if you're not in college, you have to serve in the military for 2 years. With those 2 years, they can basically go back to civilian life. They have understanding how things work, how the law enforcement work, how military work. So even if they don't agree with it, they can put the perspective. They can say, okay, this one right here, this is correct. But this one right here, oh, he totally missed the mark with this one. So this is what the public needs to be, instead of relying on emotions, because that's what we've been reduced to, Black and brown people, just relying on our emotions. We have to think more logical, embrace what's being done, and learn how to combat it. Because the only way you can learn how to fight, if you're going to go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match, you have to learn Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You can't rely on your street fighting because it's not going to work in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match. Same thing with law enforcement. Learn how law enforcement works. Learn how the car stop work. Learn how stop and frisk work. Learn how to handcuff and what type of force is being done, needs to be in order to handcuff somebody. Because I said it before, to handcuff someone that does not want to be handcuffed is very hard. And sometimes you're going to have to use a little force to soften that person up so they can give you their hands so you can cuff them. But not to the extent with the Tyre Nichols case. No. So yes, the community should be involved. And also they should be involved in selecting for commanders or chief for the departments. They have to be able to submit their resources, the resume, and the law enforcement and the community should get together and decide if that person is qualified to lead that department, that precinct, that unit. That's the only way change can happen. But the way our society is, everything is has to be done in 20 seconds or less. That process takes a long process in order for you to achieve that desired results they want. But people don't want to wait for it.
Yeah, I agree with scenario training. They should put more money into it. There's a lot of people that like to talk about policing, but we should put them in a scenario so they feel what it really feels like, as close as possible, obviously, and give them the opportunity to shoot somebody with blanks. But when they do pull the trigger, we have to treat them the same way we would treat a cop and put them through the same situation. That way they understand the next scenario. You just got grilled for shooting someone. The second time you hit that scenario, you're going to make the same mistake, or you're going to hesitate to the point where they kill you. It's the scenario training is very important, in my opinion. Anyone who has a problem with it, walk in my shoes. Let's see how you're going to handle it. Then you have better understanding. And the people that make decisions have to be mixed. It has to be people that were police, are police, civilian, of all types. We all get together, discuss it, what we really want, and how we're going to get there, and then the consequences of getting there. Understand that if we increase stop and frisk, some innocent people are going to get stopped. And we have to make this transparent so that everybody understands this is going to happen if this is what we choose. We choose. The same thing when the decision making, same way. We need a mix of people so everybody puts their 2 cents in so they can understand. And when your opinion gets shot down, give them a reason why, her or him, a reason why that decision might not work. It's easier when you explain things. And also crime. We got to sit down and redefine crime. Is that 1 gram of cocaine the same thing as 1 gram of coke, which is the same thing as raping a 2-year-old? Let's define a crime and define who is going to stay in jail. And, do we waste all these resources on what we used to call a small roach or a very minuscule amount of marijuana? Do we really want to expend all that energy and resources on that? Could that just be a summons? So again, if we really want to do something, we have to get together, and every situation we need to clarify all of them, go through it one by one and make it clear. And once it's transparent, you know what's going to happen if you have cocaine, marijuana, or whatever crime you do, and that's it. So I believe that we can get there, but I don't think people want to get there. The left and the right are too busy trying to prove their points, and they're pushing the narrative one way or the other. And it's, to me, both sides are wrong. It's somewhere in the middle that we can get things done. But I'm not a policymaker. So
yeah, and to be a policymaker these days, what does that even mean? Because a lot of these people, with the way they function within their positions, is all hypocrisy, especially when it comes to how they can benefit individually in their positions. So whoever's throwing them the money to push forth an agenda or to pass a bill, that's who they go with. So when it comes to ethics within government, it doesn't even exist anymore. And I don't even know if it really did ever, because if it did at one time, that was a long, long time ago. But with that being said, I want to discuss with you accountability first. Then we're going to talk about the prejudice within the police. And then I also want to discuss the, what it means to keep us safe, how police do keep us safe. So the first one, accountability, I'm going to read a quick article. And this is by Aman Majamuda from University of Chicago Law, Letters in Society. It says, the root cause of police brutality is that cops aren't being held accountable. When they abuse their authority, they seldom face consequences for breaking the law. That's that whole immunity discussion. A prosecutor must prove the officer acted unreasonably, but that standard becomes insufficient when violence is the norm. Qualified immunity, which protects officers from individual liability, lets them avoid the courtroom altogether. Even in the race cases where cops are convicted, their sentences seem shorter than the average civilian. When Officer Jason Van Dyke was sentenced for a second-degree murder for needlessly shooting Laquan McDonald in 2014, he received less than 7 years as punishment and ultimately served about 3 years. Reform should begin with promoting accountability amongst police officers. Police training should stress the consequences of needless violence and the importance of whistleblowing. It's concerning that those whose job it is to catch others for wrongdoing don't want to catch themselves for it. And I think that's a pretty good article because I know in regards to you, Ritchie, you was in the documentary Crime and Punishment with the Chosen 12. And a lot of what you brothers and sisters in the force were standing up for was this very thing about accountability and doing the job the right way. And a lot of you to present day, based on the information that I received, are still being treated as black sheeps. And you gotta somewhat be paranoid now within your jobs and positions because of you doing the right thing and people hating on you, which is your fellow police officers and the higher ups, for actually being whistleblowers. So let's start off with Joe. Joe, what do you think about this article about when it comes to accountability? Can you give your thoughts and perspectives and insights?
As you read it, I was nodding my head, yes. But you got to a certain point where it said officers, and I keep reiterating this fact: it's not all about the cops. It's about the supervision. It's about the higher ups. They control everything. They are we're like puppets. They have their hands and they control our movements. Yes, some of us are individually bad apples and we just go rogue, but most of the time, cops join the force to, do good and help. But as soon as we go there, we're guided by them, the people with the power, the people that control our salaries, our overtimes, our punishment. They control our behavior. And as soon as we don't do what they want, which I'm always referring to the quota, we immediately get destroyed. Protecting the whistleblower, I say it's go back to almost every article. I pulled a lot of different articles, and every time someone says something bad about the department, it's an ex-cop, he gets destroyed. And, then that teaches the next whistleblower not to do that. It's just, and it's responding to whistleblower 101 within the department. Nobody wants to be told that their technique was bad. Look at the mayor and Kelly. They were just all about stop and frisk nonstop. As soon as he wanted to become run for president, he asked for forgiveness and said, I was wrong and blah, 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 blah. But while you were doing it, everything was fine. But now that you want to run for president, now it's, I was wrong. But people were telling you that was a bad technique. You were going too far with it. So whistleblowers are being destroyed. So I definitely say protect whoever speaks up. Don't let them get touched, because it'll let the next person know that, hey, if you got a problem with the system, say something. You want the civilians to say something when there's a problem. Why not the people that see the problems all the time? So yeah, definitely focus on the higher ups. Yes, it is about the cops, but I think it's more about the supervision. And the culture keeps coming up. Every time I keep writing notes as you speak, I wrote culture so many times. It's crazy. It controls so much from within that, you really got to go in there and change it. You speak up against something, and if it doesn't fit within the culture, you get destroyed. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I like to piggyback on Joe's statement. The culture of law enforcement, especially the NYPD, which every other department follows that model, it's like a dysfunctional family. That you have an abusive parent that's abusing the whole, which would be symbolic of the head of the department, who's running the department, the politician. And he's abusing the whole family. But the one family member that speaks up against it and let the public know, listen, this parent's abusing us for years, the whole family would turn on that person. Why do you speak up? Why are you laying out business out to the public? So that's what NYPD culture is. It's a dysfunctional family with a lot of domestic abuse. You have like a Stockholm syndrome type mentality. And like you said earlier about the narcissism being on the rise, the narcissism basically will protect its own interests. So when you protect your own interests, you have an incentive of not to speak up. If you speak up, you're going to lose all these privileges. It's like it says in the book of Timothy, because in the last days, go ahead, see men that are boasters, lovers of themselves, narcissists, that they're going to do whatever they can to keep their power. They're going to promote people that think like them. Other narcissists, that's going to enforce, that not only is going to protect them, but it's going to enforce that culture of dysfunctionality within the department.
Well said for both of you, and a lot of great points were made. And it's something that people I think also we have a lack of critical thinking within American society these days. I think throughout the decades, through propaganda, what we have now is a society that when it comes to the status quo mentality, and this is something that I bring awareness a lot to on the show, is that people just like to go with the flow. Nobody really likes to research and actually be educated properly and actually do the proper work to understand what they're really experiencing. And too much of that is happening now, where the way society has been socially conditioned and engineered is that somebody says something and it becomes true. The moment it comes out of somebody's mouth, it's now true. Nobody even says, well, wait, let's take a second to understand what this is and hear everything that's involved before we even make a decision. And that whole thing about innocent until proven guilty. That's a big illusion, because nowadays somebody could say, hey, so-and-so is a rapist. So-and-so is a pedophile. So-and-so is this, a drug dealer. And immediately people believe it just the moment they hear it. Nobody wants to actually take the time to understand what's really going on. And it's a big problem these days, because instead of that innocent and proven guilty process, supposedly within our court systems, which is a draconian law system, you're really guilty until proven innocent. And what's crazy is if you're proven innocent, you're still guilty, because people will start to create their own ideas of what was said about you and be like, oh, even though he was even though he was acquitted or found innocent, I still think he did it. He just got, by with the way the laws are handled and all that. And it's so much confusion these days by design. And I don't think it's going to stop. And a great point that you made, Ritchie, is that narcissism is protecting itself. It's just like the ego, which stems where that's the vessel, ego within the flesh, right? Us being the flesh, those sinful beings. The ego is going to fight to the very death to defend itself. And like we discussed here, ego representing edging God out of your life. And that ego that gets defended, which is through narcissism, is the root cause to why this wickedness is now starting to flourish and starting to spread among society to become the new normal. I just did an episode not too long ago called Immoral, the New Normal. And immorality is now the constant state of reality, especially within the United Shenanigans of America. Now, with that being said, I want to read another article, which I think that you brothers are going to have a lot to say about this, because both of you have individually discussed this on my show. It's something that you're both very passionate about in presenting when it comes to the perception of policing, but what's really going on. It's called Police Keep Us Safe. This is by Samuel Quinones from Hillsdale College. It says, the national conversation around race and policing needs to be reformed. Systematic racism and increased policing is not the issue. It's something else. Researchers at New York University School of Public Service have found that increased police presence is highly correlated with a decrease in crime. This is probably why 81% of African Americans, according to Gallup, want police to spend the same amount of time or more in their communities. The problem is that the communities often in most need of police support are the ones encouraged by politicians and the media to view police officers as the force of community violence. Facts. That is a great point. This leads to social phenomena such as the talk, where African American parents tell their children that they are in unique danger if they ever have an encounter with a police officer. Media outlets and politicians reinforce this narrative, painting every tragic killing as a racially motivated killing. It is true that some police officers have bad motivations, but that doesn't mean that people are better off believing every police officer is out there to get them. Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is this. It goes back to what we read, like one of the episodes that we've done before, the scripture in Deuteronomy 16:18 or 18:16. I always get it confused. Judges and officers that you have throughout the gates. So spiritually, we understand the need for police officers in our community. And we do want them there because majority of the people, we have something called the silent majority, that the majority of people in our communities want the cops to be there. But they don't say anything. They keep quiet. They go home, they go to work, they go to sleep, they take care of their family. But those that do not want us there, that small minority, they are the most vocal. It goes to the old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So those that speak up, they always going to be heard compared to those that don't speak up. Now the talk. We all know the society is corrupt, is not meant for us. It's meant for the dominant group who is in power. So things that they say a white kid could get away with, we all know in this panel that we can't do the same thing, right? We have to be a little bit more cautious. We have to watch the way we talk because unfortunately with the media and stats, we are perceived as being super aggressive, super predators. That's what Hillary Clinton said, or one of the Clinton says, that we are super predators. That's why people like you could come from a country like Japan or from Poland or from Finland that never met a black or brown people, but based on what they see in the media, they think we are super violent, that we are criminals, that we are unintelligent, that we are unapproachable. So yeah, it's very important how we being perceived. But like the article said, most black and brown people that are not doing anything wrong, they want us in the community. What they just don't want is the abuse of power. So that's really where you have to separate. The one in the police officer there, but not to abuse their power. Because I remember I was in college, there was a phenomenon, they did a study that the issue with a lot of Black Americans, Latinos, is not that a person gets arrested, it's how they got arrested, that they had issue. And that tells a big difference, you know? If you're getting yourself beat to a bloody pulp and you get arrested for committing a crime, yeah, okay, he committed a crime, needs to be arrested, but was that to get beaten like Tyre Nichols, was that necessary?
Yeah, I have multiple opinions when it comes to that article. One of them is says, I'm sorry?
I'm going to step out for a quick second. I'll be right back.
Sure. Right. What happened basically is most Black and brown communities want the police there as long as they police fairly. But I see this, sometimes I see this, and it happens often, where someone will complain that their development, there's too many people hanging out. And the same people that want us there, the same people I find smoking in the hallway. And they want policing, to be done on other than them. Like, well, I live here, but yeah, you're violating. You want us here. You want us to enforce, but you're the one who's breaking the rules also. So sometimes they want us to enforce, not them, just on a specific person, the people that are hanging out in the hallway downstairs or whatever, the young kids or whatever. They want law enforcement directed just to them. But when we go and do what we call a vertical, and we just go from the top of the building down and we just make sure everything's fine, a lot of times we find the people that live there violating the rules. And I find that slightly hypocritical sometimes when I see both sides. I was like, well, I understand, but if you want policing, all we're telling you is you can't do it. And then they get very obnoxious about it. So sometimes they got to be careful when they want more police in the neighborhood, because a lot of times they're the ones speeding. Oh, there's too many people speeding down this road. And then when we pull them over, they're the ones that live in the neighborhood. They're regular people, and they're speeding also. So sometimes I see that, whereas it's always policing for a specific group, but never to them. So that's one of those opinions that I ran into a lot. Also, the media. The media controls what we hear, and that's what we need. A lot of free media, podcasts, etc. Just so the truth could be told. A lot of the truths are controlled by the media, and they let you know what and who are the bad guys. They control everything. So you sit there and go, okay, so Black people are bad, and Hispanic people are bad because the media keeps telling you this. But they don't tell you the other side. This is why I believe that media has to be a little more open and free and not controlled. So
let's drop a bomb for that one, Joe.
Yeah.
Let's drop another one, because that was such a great point.
Oh yeah. And
go ahead, brother.
And then usually when you arrest somebody and they're not guilty about something, they always say, well, he did something wrong. Other than that, he's not guilty of rape or robbery, but he did something wrong. And a lot of people have that mentality. Well, okay, he was innocent in regards to this. His reputation is ruined, but he did something wrong. And this is the mentality people have, Also, like I had a specific situation where we go to policing and you see a lot of Black and Hispanics and they're popping wheelies and ATVs in the streets. And I'm with the cop and they'll say, oh, look at these savages, etc. And then I go to my community, which is Upper New York, and I take video of white kids doing the same thing. And I randomly just, sometimes I'll see some cops in the street and have some random conversation. Their opinion is different. They're good kids having fun. They come from good parents. Yeah, they shouldn't be doing it, but there's no harm, no foul. That police, Upper New York, is not going to arrest or bother those kids. But when you go to the city and you see the same thing, they're animals and savages. So policing sometimes has, you can look at it through different eyeglasses. And I bumped into a lot of that also, a lot of hypocrisy. And again, it's all within the culture where the white kids doing the same thing that we're doing they're okay because they're good kids just having fun, but we're savages. So we need to figure out what's what. I mean, obviously it's dangerous because you put people in, you put people in peril when you pop wheelie up and down the streets. When it's wrong, it's wrong. So we need to figure that out also because that kid is never going to get stopped. He's never going to have a record because he's not going to get stopped. But the kid, the Black and Hispanic kid that gets stopped, he'll have a record and a bad reputation. So that you get to see these things as a police officer. Well, I mean, when it comes to the article, that's just little points that I saw. And I do believe that police are needed. We just got to be very careful of what we ask of them because they're just going to produce arrests. That's what we do. Doctors save people or try to save people. Right. We arrest and summons. It's just, our firemen, they turn off fires and try to help people. But they don't have a quota of how many fires they turn off, but we will. So be very careful when you have a bunch of police officers in a community. The end result, most of the time, is going to be some sort of quota, some sort of numbers that govern everything.
Right.
I would
Ritchie.
like to add on this point about the stopping. Like the kids, like in suburbia, how they get treated compared to the kids in the city. One of my fraternal group, the National Latino Officer Association, they sued the department because what happened, a lot of these kids from the inner city, South Bronx, East New York, Spanish Harlem, Lower East Side, as they get stopped by the police department, by police during the height of the 250 stop risk, even though they was not guilty of anything, their name was put in the database. And since they was put in the database where they're trying to go for a police job, they was denied the job because they had that stop there, that name in the record. Because it goes, well, you didn't do nothing wrong. We couldn't prove you didn't do anything wrong, but you must have done something. So that's why we're not going to hire you. People in Upper Westchester don't have that same issues as people in the city. So that's why it's important to define what police work is, what quality police work is, and how they're supposed to interact in our communities.
Well, that brings me. No, go ahead, brother.
I like to add one thing. I keep writing, but I never. Keith mentioned that was the name. It was the Viper Unit, right? What was it called?
Yeah, the Scorpion Unit.
Scorpion. Okay, it's Well, I remember you made a point about what the scorpion mean and what it represents, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, it's a special ops unit. They get special privileges. They get to dance on the line of the law. They get more chances than anyone else. They get special privileges and are allowed to behave in a certain manner. Those units are very dangerous. They're very good stopping specific things, but they're very dangerous because the more power, the easier it is to corrupt. So they have to be extremely supervised and accountable for what they do. And again, we need to really control what crime is, what they're going after. And a lot of times they will arrest, not having enough to arrest. But the district attorneys and the commanding officers, their arrests make them look good because numbers basically make everybody look good, from politicians all the way down. These special ops, we shouldn't get rid of them, but we should monitor them because as they can be very effective, but they can get very corrupt quickly. It looks like that whole unit was not, let's just say that corruption in my eyes looked like it was normal for them. It was just like breathing. So we definitely should look into these special ops units and watch them carefully, because again, they could be awesome when it comes to specific crimes, but they can go rogue quickly, and they have a lot of leeway, because who's backing them up is from the mayor down. It's once you have the back, they'll look the other way.
Very true. And something you mentioned about the quotas, and I wanted to make a point about this based on my experiences in corporate America, and then we're going to talk about the take the prejudice out of police, and talk about that with y'all. Being in corporate America for over 17 years when I was, one thing I noticed was that everything is based on a quota that's also tied into incentives, which ties into bonuses, and it just trickles into bad behavior. And what I mean by that is that when I was in the insurance industry and marketing and sales, and this is even before I became into management or in the director's position that I held, is that just being an agent is like, you saw a lot of people, and even I was guilty of doing this, especially in the beginning of my career at the time, is where you get these quotas that you have to meet. And on top of that, there's these incentives to not only meet the quota, but to exceed them. And if you got to certain plateaus or certain pinnacles within those incentives that were put out, you would get rewarded higher and higher and higher. And just a basic example is like, hey, if you get, let's say, 100 policies written within the month, you're going to win a vacation. If you get 200, you're going to win a car, and so on and so forth. So what would happen is, you would have a lot of agents that started to become unethical because they became desperate in wanting to achieve that incentive goal. So let's say, for example, you had somebody who was, they had 2 days left and they only had 97 policies that were sold. And it's now 2 days left. So let's say the deadline is Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is now Saturday morning, 9 a.m. And that agent is like, how in the fuck am I going to get these 3 policies to meet that, incentive? Because I really want that car. I really want that trip. So then what they start doing is they become desperate, and then they start doing a lot of things that are unethical and against all the training that they received and all the things that they were told that you shouldn't be doing when pursuing a prospective client / customer. And they would get somebody and, they would just bullshit them and tell them, yeah, sign here, just sign here, because they wanted to get the policy. And when you brought up about the quotas, about policing, I think that's a lot what happens with the officers, is that they become desperate to meet these quotas so that they're not reprimanded and other things that happen that both of you have discussed in previous episodes. So I think that this corporate structure, when it comes to quotas, needs to be taken out of policing, because it's a civil servant job. And just like you said, Joe, about the fire departments, it's like they don't have a certain amount of fires they have to put out. They put out the fires that are, roaring and that need to be distinguished. And it should be the same with police. It's like, why are you putting pressure on police officers to have all these arrests and summonses when they should just focus on crime? And if there's less crime to focus on any particular week, then that's a win. That means that collectively the police department is doing their job. It's not where, okay, there's less crime this week, so let's just pull something out of our ass and find something wrong where there's nothing wrong. Because that's narcissistic behavior 101, to find something wrong where there's nothing wrong and create this discord, or sow this discord and create this problem. So I just wanted to mention that. The other thing too, and this is the next topic, is all 3 of us on this broadcast grew up in New York City. And if you remember, brothers, and I don't know if they still have it, because I haven't been in New York in over 7 years. But I know I started to see it a lot less, even when I was an adult in New York and I had moved upstate, but I would still travel down there. I grew up in Castle Hill, and I remember Pal which I believe stands for the Police Association League, right? That's what it stands for? And PAL, right? So I remember back in the days in the Castle Hill projects on Randall Avenue, all right, that when they used to have the PAL or the PAL, it used to be, I think it used to start at 11 or 12 o'clock in the afternoon and would go on for several hours. And I remember it being such a fun time. And one thing I do remember as I got older and I started to just analyze it for what it was, I think it gave an opportunity for the police officers that were assigned to the event on a weekly basis to really have to develop an intimate relationship with the community, which not only allowed the police officers to see these people within the community that they were serving as human beings that are just like them, that are just trying to live a life and survive in this very complex society that we live in. But it also gave the community an opportunity to get to know the police officers in the same respect. And that created a bond that made for better policing. So I'm going to read this article and then I want to hear your perspectives on this. Take the Prejudice Out of Police by Kiera Hines, Quinnipiac University. Defunding the police is meant to refocus funds on crime deterrence programs while still maintaining the functionality of police force. The death of Tyre Nichols, however, is the proof that police reform efforts have been ineffective. Crime deterrence programs are bound to fail. The victims of police brutality rarely commit serious crimes. The problem underlying police brutality is the prejudice of the policemen themselves. Reform should focus on examining and reshaping the values of the police. The force should have stricter educational requirements to enter training and hire comprehensive degree programs that focus on police reform, critical race theory, and the appropriate use of force. The public is safer with a highly educated, socially aware police force. A strong police force should not be measured by funds, wealth, or size, but rather by ethics, value, and racial awareness. Refocusing funds towards educational programs and professional degree requirements would help police reform departments and protect our communities. Your thoughts?
For the most part, it made a lot of points. The one where I put education is needed because when it comes to educating the officers, very, very important. When you teach an officer about other cultures and what's expected of that culture, you would understand when you deal with an African family as opposed to an Asian family, as opposed to a Hispanic family. Different cultures they trend in their cultures. It's good to know certain things that I bumped into this one African family where the woman said nothing. She was battered, beaten. The man was in control. And just knowing a little bit of the culture, I understood what was happening. And in that culture, she was not allowed to speak. It was his household. He was the man in the house, and he controlled the whole situation, even though she was a victim. So we had to reach her in a different way. But I knew this, and we put things into play where we could speak to her in private in another location. But it's good. Education is good in regards to just different cultures. You're in New York City. It's a melting pot of cultures. So I definitely agree in that. The community policing we have now, in my opinion, sucks. They made it into a numbers issue. They said that we needed to spend X amount of hours going from business to business, talking to people. A lot of people didn't want to talk, but they didn't care. Still go in there every day, still do what we got to do, even though expressly they said, I don't want the cops in my business. But we still had to go in there because we had to spend 2 hours or an hour, whatever the number was, even though it was not effective. So, it's always about numbers. They always do it the wrong way. Community policing is necessary, but at the same time, when you're trying to talk to somebody who's playing basketball, they're like, well, you could be spending this time writing summonses. So a lot of times the same politicians that say, hey, we're going to be doing community policing. By the time he gets down to that sergeant and he's supervising me, he's like, well, why are you here talking to these kids? You should be out there writing summonses because today is cell phone initiative. So it's a lot of BS that goes on when it comes to that. When it comes to, you were talking about making it in a business format. Well, when Kelly was in power, they really tried to make it into some sort of corporate system where, the chiefs were executives, officers, and then there was like foremans or whatever. These sergeants were supposed to be like a foreman, and they all were held accountable for numbers. So I've definitely seen this corporate structure, and it failed. And when they're trying to sell something to you, it's almost like, in my opinion, I hope I don't hurt nobody's feelings, but timeshare. These salesmen are constantly telling you things that don't exist because they have this quota, and they keep lying to you and sign because they get paid, and they lie to you. And at the end of the day, because you signed, you get hooked in. Some of these salesmen have very little moral, because they want that money. Some of them have to feed their family, and some of them are just, it's fun for them to be corrupt.
Especially if they're narcissistic. I mean, the narcissist thrives in corporate America. And this is a statistical fact. Anybody listening can do their research on this. I've talked about it plenty of times. Narcissists make more money in corporate America than any other person. So a person who has ethics, values, empathy, that is going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, they're always going to make less money, have less rewards than the person who's a narcissist who really don't give a shit. They'll step on their own mother's back to be successful in whatever it is they're doing.
It also says something about time, like overtime. We don't get bonuses like that. The reward police officers is by giving them easy overtime. If there's something called where you can make overtime and you don't really have to work hard, these specialized units, they get first dibs. So as long as you produce the arrests and summonses, etc., they get first dibs on the easy overtime. Everybody else, we have to fight for the hard overtime where we really have to work and produce numbers to make to get overtime. When you become that narcissist that arrests people and start bending the rules, you get status. You become bigger than you're a regular cop, but you walk taller and you look down at everybody. And
you're a hero.
That's what. Yeah, you get that superhero complex. And then and the rules are lax to them. They could break rules. They could come in, work out for 2-3 hours, and nobody says anything. And then they go outside and they work for 4 hours a day, and everybody else has to work 9. And it's okay because they produce. And as long as you have, producing and you're a productive cop by getting arrests and summonses and putting the right people in jail, mind you, right, being Black and Hispanic, you get more status and you get all this benefit. So yeah, all of that article was on point. But like I said, we can pick apart this thing, but nobody really want to address the real situations. They prefer to get somebody who with a college degree who has no idea what policing is about, but he has a good title, whatever that is, and they make decisions for us, and it makes no sense because they don't want to deal with reality. They just say, you know what, on paper, let's just do it this way.
Right. So, I just thought about how, and I love that documentary, Crime and Punishment, and I remember this scene with the officer that was with the supervisor in the car. He's like, "Oh, we're gonna get you a collar," and I remember being in a similar situation like that with a manager in insurance when I was in supplemental insurance sales. And I remember this manager told me during training, he's like, "All right, let's see which sucker we're going to get today." Like, let's see which sucker we're going to take advantage of and see how many policies to get him to sign. And from those experiences, I used to always say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell my customers, my prospective clients, what's in the small print. I'm going to let them know everything that the agent never tells them. And you know what? A lot of my clients were police officers and firemen, and he used to tell me, "You never had an experience like this with an insurance agent. Like you actually telling me stuff that I never knew about." And I'm like, exactly. Because I'd rather make a sale based on being honest, where there's complete transparency, opposed to me bullshitting you and telling you to sign on the dotted line. And then when something does go wrong, when you do have to use that policy for a specific reason and you were misled, now you're going to be disappointed. And I think this transfers into any type of industry. It doesn't matter if it's healthcare, police, that corporate structure, it's only meant to serve narcissism. It's only meant to have a lack of empathy. And if you have a lack of empathy, you will strive within that environment. But in something like policing, that shouldn't even exist. Corporate structure should not exist in policing. But go ahead, Brother Ritchie. I just want to make a point on that.
I just want to add on. The issue with policing and the corporate structure is that they make quota and crime one and the same. So if the officer is not meeting the quota, it's essentially saying they're not fighting crime. And that psychological effect, like what Pete says, of you not doing the job, so-called, because they didn't make enough arrests, you didn't write enough summonses. And you see the next guy who basically doesn't care about anybody, writes and arrests everybody and their mother, producing, then you start feeling bad about yourself. He says, oh, wow, I'm not producing. I'm not fighting crime. I'm a zero. So you got the guy that's writing and arresting everybody, their mother, be considered a hero. And the person that uses their discretion, use their conscience in regards to whether or not they should summons this person or arrest this person, he's going to start considering himself a zero. And also the way the structure is, the culture is at NYPD with the whistleblowers and people that's trying to do the right thing. Those people get isolated. I got isolated from my partner. I got broken up. My new partner, they broke me and her up. And they try to make sure that the younger officers, they won't put me to work with them because they fear that my influence, what they're going to do. And they keep me isolated. They only let me work with other undesirables. So my influence on these officers would be limited.
Yes, isolating. That's a very good point. When the rookies come in, they give them a different tour. So the regular cops start, I'm just going to make a time up. Let's say that the regular cops start at 7 o'clock. The rookies will start at 6 or at 8 after we're not in the precinct. So they get their own roll call. So they try to separate the people that know what's going on between the new guys, because the new guys are just, they listen. They want to perform. They're eager. They're ignorant, and easily to brainwash them to get them to do whatever they want them to do. So they will isolate. There are a lot of people in the higher ups that know exactly what to do with whistleblowers, with the rookies, with et cetera. And early on, they train you to be that heavy hitter cop, the guy to go out there and just writes and summonses and just meets the quota. And once they find you, that's an easy path to special ops. And then they start isolating you, saying that you're better than them. You're going to be a detective. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And it's very simple, real quick. They'll find who you are and they'll put you on these specialized units. But a lot of times these rookies get in trouble because they never teach them the right way to do things. They just teach quantity, not quality. More and more. It's okay if you bent the rule. Just keep going. The more numbers, this captain is going to be promoted and he's going to remember you when he becomes a chief and he's going to help you out, whatever. So that's part of the culture you were talking about. We were talking about these salesmen like Bank of America. And what they did with opening up all these accounts, just because they had this quota system that because corporation gone wild. So many people, got horrified. This lawsuit that transpired. And when you do these whistleblowers, they get caught up in this grapevine, this police grapevine, where your reputation gets tarnished real quick. Psychological warfare. So as soon as you do something, you get called a rat, and within seconds, another precinct knows it. Another precinct know it. It gets put on the NYPD rant. Eventually, everybody knows that you're a rat. They have no idea what happened, but this grapevine, this little communication is real quick. It happens instant. As soon as something happens, a lot of people will know, and they will get they'll get notified real quick. And your ego, your personality, your soul, it takes a hit, and you got to be really, really, really strong to get through that for 20 years. And if you did that early in your career, let's say around 5, you got 15 years to deal with this stuff and it won't go away. That captain or that sergeant is now a captain and he remembers what you did. That captain is now a chief. He remembers what you did. None of them were accountable. All of them went right up the ranks without a problem. You're the only one who got stuck. They have power now and they can control what happens to you. And they do. If you put in for a unit, is a silent no, just reject him, take the other person. So it's a very interesting culture that has to be fixed.
Something that came to mind during this discussion is just American society and how we operate and what we value as important, and the way things are structured within our institutions throughout the country. And one thing I remember, and I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I know you both have experienced this in throughout the years of your current service. I remember there was a company that I worked for. They got it down to like a 1 week training, but it used to be 2 weeks. So you go for a 2 week training in Chicago. Very thorough training. You know what I mean? You cover a lot. There's this whole positive culture, and they play these videos and everything's uplifting, and it's like church. It's just everything is good vibes. They preach that prosperity church doctrine instead of the truth. But it's all about, hey, you're going to be successful, and this is our culture here, and we're going to support you and all that. You're going to go out in the field, and you're going to make $5,000 by this amount of days and blah, blah, blah. And it never failed. It's like you go through this 2 week training, and then as soon as you hit the field with your with your supervisor or manager, what's the first thing that happens? Listen, I know they taught you all that shit in training, but this is how we really do things here. So forget about all that. And I'm going to show you how we do things here in our group. And then it's almost like you're just like, what? And then you're a little distraught in the first part of it. But then you're just being a human being, you're going to adapt pretty quickly, because these are your peers. These are the people that now you're going to be working with throughout your career if you're planning on staying there. So you're going to quickly adapt to their culture of doing things. And what winds up happening to whoever is your supervisor, you're going to start to adapt their behavior, their bad habits, and institute that into your behavior. And now that becomes the curriculum that you follow and that you evolve in. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
That supervisor, that reminds me of like a Ponzi pyramid scheme back in the days. But getting down to policing, that's exactly how it happens with that group. As a rookie, you go out, they figure out which one is the heavy hitters, they separate them, that they become special ops. Those people get more study time because they get a lot more downtime. So they become supervisors, and then they're known for producing numbers. So the captain will pick them up and say, I need you to be my crime sergeant. And now he or she knows that this crime sergeant as a rookie was a heavy hitter. And he became a special ops, went into crime, conditions, narcotics, whatever. Now he's a sergeant. That his way of thinking going to trickle down into these rookies that he's going to take on, and he's going to turn them into style of policing that he knows, or she. And that's how that down effect where their supervisor, you're going to pick up their bad habits. They're going to teach you, oh, you made a mistake here. Don't worry about it. Let's explain it this way to the district attorney, and it'll be accepted. So, yeah, those bad habits that this captain, lieutenant, whoever, those will trickle down. You will pick them up, and they become yours. And when you become a sergeant, you're going to teach the person underneath you to behave this way, because numbers are what they want. They don't want good policing. They want numbers. Now, our job is to arrest. The ADA's job is to sentence and put them in jail. So that's not, we give them as much as we can. That's why a lot of this stuff with all these changes where we have to give up a lot of information that we find, because the police department likes to hold back stuff that'll make you innocent. So now it's like, you have to release everything we find, all the witnesses, not just the ones that say, hey, he did it or she did it. But now it's like, you got to release everything. And this, the ADA does not want you to say, hey, I think the sergeant overreached, or the lieutenant, I think he violated somebody's rights because of, look what he did. He did this and this, or she did this and this. And that's what I believe, that there's certain changes that release all the information, release the truth. There could be a video that says, hey, it wasn't this guy. This guy was in another location. But why are we arresting him? Because he's the local bad guy. He fits the description, and who cares? We got to close out 5 to 10 cases. We'll all pin it on him, and then let the ADA sort it out. And then all of those get closed out as cops doing the right, getting the job done. And at the same time, they pull all these things together, give them a little plead guilty to some minor stuff. That's it. So it's very interesting. But yeah, these supervisors, you will pick up on their bad habits.
Your thoughts, Ritchie?
Yeah, everything trickles down. And the incentive is this. by you known as, well, quote unquote, making a lot of arrests and writing a lot of summonses, you're known as a heavy hitter. And when you go up the ranks, basically that style of policing is you're going to have a bunch of proteges following your style of policing. So that culture continues on. That's really what it is. It leaves a legacy of bad policing. And the only way you can eliminate that legacy is basically, instead of just going by what numbers it is by the quality of arrest. How well does that person get along with the community? How did he got the arrest? Was it ethically right? Because the mentality of police officer, it doesn't matter how I made this gun arrest as long as I got the gun off the streets. The issue is not the gun, it's the shooter, the person that pulls the trigger. Because the person that's pulling the trigger is not sentenced. He's going to come back and get a different gun and continue doing the shooting.
Right.
That's the way you reduce crime. People that commit the crime needs to get prosecuted. How they get prosecuted? But you getting the evidence correctly and lawfully against that person. Once you package that to the ADA, then you can get that person sentenced for 5, 10, 15 years. Guess what? That guy that's responsible for 10 shootings, their shooting is going to be no more. And a prime example is when the feds took out, if familiar with the South Bronx, 149th Street and Jackson Avenue, was hell on earth. Shootings, robberies, you name it, it was happening. When the feds took them down, it's been a quiet block for the last 10 years now, because they set up a case against these guys and set up the case, bunked the evidence, they got prosecutors, and they got sentenced. So it's not just about getting the gun off the streets. You have to get the criminal off the street as well.
There was a behavior I saw that was really, really strange. It happened for a couple of years, where the captains and the lieutenants would pick a driver and just drive around, stop people randomly, jump out the car, search them, find a drug, and call a person that doesn't have a lot of summonses or arrests to the location and say, this is your arrest. They assign the arrest. And now this cop he's up. There's a dilemma. Does he put the truth? I showed up after the captain searched him. The captain found the alleged drugs in this location. Or does he reword it and say that because that's exactly what the captain wants you to do, is hey, don't put me on the scene. Just put down, you observed it and you did this. Now you get put on the spot. Do you make an enemy of this captain or lieutenant, or do you lie, test the lie, fudge? You know the guy is guilty anyway. Do you know? And it puts you at that point where they put you into this. They want to know who you are. Are you going to be part of us, or you be part of them? They used to happen a lot. And the point is, anybody who put that the sergeant or captain was the one who found the drugs or found something, you would get ostracized really quickly, and your career would take a turn. So they put you right on the spot quicker. They want to know who you are.
That's something similar to what I've seen in the insurance industry. Like when somebody would be in their first week of training, and they had to meet a certain quota to get the incentive. And the incentive not just was for the new agent. The incentive was for the manager, director, and the whole entire team. That it was certain tiers of incentives that everybody was going to benefit from. So you would have it to where if the agent was low on numbers as far as clients or customers to sign up, let's say one of the more experienced agents or one of the managers had a person who was going to purchase some policies, they would get that trainee and say, hey, come over to such and such place. You're going to sign your name on these policies so we can get you to meet your quota or your fast start program or whatever it was. And then you're there like, okay, because you're the trainee, you want to meet that and you want to be successful. And that's how they would do it. So it's like basically you're starting off your career with lying to where the lying becomes the norm now. It's like, oh, this is how we do things. So it's very interesting. This is happening everywhere.
Yeah. That cop who basically was assigned that arrest and had to lie on paperwork now is a sergeant or lieutenant. It's going to somebody else.
Right. And
it'll continue until it ends. There'll be captains jumping out of cars and just illegally searching people. And, lieutenant, same thing. And then, bringing somebody to the scene and putting them on the spot. Remember that cop who had to write what didn't happen, or let's say there was a gun found in a car and you have to put down that it was in plain view because the captain was the one who did the car stop, and no captain wants to go to court to testify. So it's like, don't put me on the scene. And then you have to make that choice. So it's I would say it's definitely not that's why some of these cameras are good. because now you go up to the scene and your camera's rolling and everything, the captain did the car stop. Captain found it in plain view, wherever he or she said they found it. And then you take it from there. It's all informed by this. And then you write down what you observed after that. So it kind of helps. I remember, I think we probably wanted to talk about these body cams. I think that it supports good cops and it forces these bad cops to be very careful what they do on the scene.
Well, let's end off the broadcast with that. Your thoughts on this whole body cam situation? What do you think?
The body cam is a great tool. It's a very good tool, especially for the police officers, because a lot of times we get allegations made against us, false allegations made against us. The body cam will basically disprove the whole thing. Also, if you're doing something that you're not supposed to do, it catches it there. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's a win for the public. It's a win for the police officers that have it. It's a great deterrent and from you doing something illegally. And even though there's some ways like Pete pointed out earlier, there's some ways you can articulate why you didn't have the body camera or why the body camera was off or didn't work. It's not perfect, but it eliminates a lot. And it tells the story more vividly,
Yeah, I believe that it's a positive thing because it should be used to fix technique and issues with what the cop did, not to punish him. I believe that, hey, you did this wrong. This is what we need you. We need you to correct it next time. And then if they continue the same, then punishment should be incorporated. But I think it should be used more about fixing the problem and not causing another problem, because internal affairs, why they have a good system. They also have quotas. They need to write certain amount of summonses against us cops. So they will use some of this video to come after us and hurt us. So sometimes we become a little scared and tentative, and that puts us in danger. I do believe that it should be used to fix the problem. I'm a proponent in fixing the problem, not causing more problems. By giving internal affairs power to just hurt you that quick. I think they should fix the problem, because then you'll see that, oh yeah, he made a mistake. He or she made a mistake. They fixed it. We're going to move forward. If you constantly make a mistake, then we see where the bad seed is, and then it has to be addressed in a different way. So the person who makes an excuse is constantly saying, I left my camera, that person should be dealt with. Whereas if it happens every now and then, this is your first offense. It literally ran out of battery time, or it fell off when you were driving and it landed in the car somewhere, but there were 3 other cameras there. So it should definitely be a tool to help make policing better. And also it'll keep some of these specialized units in check when we show on the scene, because there's a lot of corrupt behavior with certain cops.
All right. So before we end this broadcast, any last final thoughts on this topic that we're discussing, or anything else that you wanted to bring into this broadcast to make people aware of? Either one of you?
One of these, I remember meeting someone who says police reform. They were like, get rid of the police completely. I think that's a terrible thing to do. But it really you have to go to the core and reinvent everything from the beginning. The transparency, the people who are accountable, and I think we have to put more of the community, get more information out there so they understand what's happening. So getting rid of the police department altogether, definitely don't think it's a good move.
Yeah.
But we definitely have to go from the core, starting from the politician all the way down. And we should focus on technique and community. And every community has a specific need. And not all the precincts should be the same, working for the same numbers, because they're constantly using these numbers against the commanding officer. And again, we should be very careful about these specialized units. They're very good, but got to keep them in check. Mm-hmm. And the whistleblowers, protect them. And I'm just saying that, it could be done. I just don't think nobody really wants it done. The people that have the power, they don't want it done. They just like the power, and they like to getting away with it. So that's just my last opinion.
Okay, thank you. And it's like what Ritchie was saying about the dysfunctional family. I think that the way it's structured, they wanted to maintain that dysfunctionality as the norm. And just as a side note, I used to be that guy. Not too long ago, I was like, do away with the whole entire police departments. I used to be a big advocate for that, saying, the hell with the police. We don't need them. We can police ourselves as a community. But I think, obviously, my whole idea of that is completely changed. I was very foolish in believing that, because in actuality, and what I was mentioning about the PAL back in the days, is that it takes a village to raise a child. And I think that if the police force or departments work in coincidence with the community, then that is the village working together to raise the children and to protect the children. And there has to be checks and balances and accountability. So I just wanted to make that as a side note that I used to be that guy, but I was very foolish in that thinking, because it's not good to do away with the police, because it serves a purpose if it's done the right way. Go ahead, Ritchie.
Also, having the police force is really the first line of defense against criminals and also against tyranny. Because if you look at all these societies like Nazi Germany, communist China, and Russia, first thing they did is basically defund and dissolve police departments in those countries. And they set up their own military and specialized groups to terrorize the people. So taking away the police departments, essentially taking the rights of every American's country.
And any last thoughts before we end the broadcast from you, Ritchie?
No, that's it. That was my last thoughts right there.
Okay, great. Well, I want to thank you both for coming on to today's show, Police Reform, The Quiet Storm. I think both of you have brought great points to this topic of discussion today. And if you haven't checked out the movie Crime and Punishment, definitely check it out. I believe it's on Hulu. You'll see Ritchie on there. And, people, like I always say, we just have to be aware and prepared. Times are tough right now. The agenda for total control and for this one world order beast system is in full effect. And just like Rome, and just like many other great empires before Rome, you always have to bring about a one world system or deplete the system at hand by taking down the infrastructure. And one of the most important institutions within infrastructure is our police department, because let's just keep it real. There's a lot of psychos out there. There's a lot of crazy people out there that other people need to be protected from, that are just trying to live their life, pay their bills and raise their families and just do right by their community and just live a fruitful and happy lifestyle without it being interrupted by some type of chaotic influence that our governments are somehow manipulating, like allowing pedophiles and rapists into the streets by the boatloads, like they're doing currently in California. So thank you again, brothers, for coming on to the show. And let's exit out of here. And this is what I'm going to say. Like I always say, brothers and sisters, when you live in the present, there's always an opportunity for a new beginning. Don't look for the light at the end of the tunnel, because the light is and always will be within you. So light up the tunnel and find your way through the darkness. This is all the informationalists from the Network of Awareness saying peace, love, and light. All praises to the Heavenly Father, Yahweh Elohim, and His Son, Yahweh, also known as Christ. And peace and blessings to you, brothers and sisters. Barakatah and Shalom.